What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the TCL 30Z and going over whether or not it's still a good phone to buy in 2023. Now, before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button. And in case you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. Now, the TCL 30Z is a really affordable lower-end device. When it was originally launched, it was only available with a couple different carriers. As you can see, I actually do have the Cricket version, but over time, more and more carriers started offering this phone, and at this point, it's even available factory unlocked as well. Now, personally, I would probably not buy a phone like this factory unlocked. I feel like the best case scenario is getting this phone for free through a carrier, but just keep in mind, if you do want to get this phone unlocked, it is always an option. Now, with the display here, we're getting a 6.1-inch IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 282, and an aspect ratio of 19.5 by 9. So on one hand, is it the best display out there? Of course not, this is a really low-end phone. But that being said, for what it is, keep in mind, through most carriers, you can get this phone for less than $100. And considering that, it's actually really not bad. The image quality is definitely good here. The colors and brightness for what it is are really not bad. And despite only having a 720p resolution, things are decently crisp and clear. At 6.1 inches, it's not the largest display out there, but I definitely do think it will at least get the job done. I mean, my iPhone 13 for that matter is the exact same size and it works perfectly fine. So honestly, unless you're specifically looking for a really large display, I do think the TCL 30Z is going to be plenty large enough for you. So in general, I would say if you're not looking for really an amazing display per se, but you still want something that's at least going to be good enough for daily use, the display we're getting here with the TCL 30Z is going to be perfectly fine. And honestly, for a phone in this price range, I do think it is one of the better options. Now for storage with this phone, we're getting 32GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and honestly, this is really not a lot. At this point in 2023, with stuff like the system, apps, and just files in general getting larger and larger, no matter what you're doing on your phone, 32GB is going to fill up pretty quickly. Now that being said, of course, if you're hardly doing anything on your phone, and maybe you only have a couple apps, and other than that, just stuff like photos and videos you can easily put on a microSD card anyway, then you should be at least okay. But in general, I would say for the average user, while you might get by with this kind of storage if you're really careful, it's definitely not going to be fun. So if storage is more of a concern for you, then I would definitely go with something else. Now for security features, unfortunately this phone doesn't have a fingerprint scanner, but it does have face unlock, so at least we're getting one other option besides a pin to unlock it. Now in my opinion, this is kind of too bad because at this point, a fingerprint scanner on a phone is more or less an expectation. But then again, there are even higher end phones like iPhones for example that don't have fingerprint scanners either. And again, at least we do get face unlock, so unless you really want a fingerprint scanner, this is probably not going to be a deal breaker. For the camera setup, there's really not a whole lot here. For the front facing camera, we got a typical water drop notch design. This camera is 5 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a single camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. So in general, as far as features go, as you can see, there's really not a whole lot there. No ultra wide camera, no macro camera, not even a depth sensing camera, although to be fair, portrait mode still technically works. It's just not going to be nearly as good as most phones. In general, if you're taking a lot of pictures, this is not going to be the phone for you because aside from not having a ton of features, the photo quality we're getting here is definitely not the best either. Sure, if you're using Snapchat or something where the quality doesn't really matter, or you're just taking a couple photos every now and then, it will at least be acceptable. But again, if you really care about photo quality and you are taking a decent amount of photos, then you're definitely going to want a phone with a better camera than this. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, the TCL 30Z is getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio A22 processor. So keep in mind, this is really not a fast phone, and it's definitely not meant for anything above basic activities. So if you're doing something like high performance mobile gaming, for example, or you're just going to be on your phone a lot, then you will want something a lot faster. But that being said, not everyone is a heavy user, and some people really just need a basic device for really normal activities. So for more light use, in basic activities like web browsing, social media, watching the occasional video every now and then, and stuff like that, while again, definitely not being fast at all, this phone will at least get the job done. But again, if you're using your phone for more heavy activities, like mobile gaming and stuff like that, or you're just going to be on your device a lot, then you're definitely going to want to go with something much faster. Now I did run a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on it, and here are the scores I got. What I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of what the performance difference is going to be like. I imagine for most people, this phone is most likely not going to be an upgrade, but if you already have a pretty low-end device and you're not really looking for a performance upgrade per se, then getting a phone that's around the same speed is probably going to be at least okay. But again, in general, in terms of performance, I would definitely say this phone is really meant for basic light use, and if you're doing anything else, you are going to want something quite a bit faster. Now when it comes to the battery, this phone has a 3000 mAh battery, so on one hand, if battery life is really a priority for you, you can do quite a bit better, but on the other hand, the battery life on this phone really isn't terrible, and if you just need something decent that works, it will at least get the job done. Another interesting thing about the battery here is that it's actually removable, and in case you're wondering, to take it out, what you're going to do is pull on this tab right here. The back is going to come off, and there we go. as you can see the battery is right here, as well as the slots for the SIM card and the microSD card. So definitely interesting here. At this point in 2023, you're really not going to see this every day. And the benefit of it is that if you're in a situation where you know you're not going to be able to charge your phone, you can always get a second battery. So when this one dies, you can simply just replace it and then you won't even need to charge it. So that's definitely a cool feature you get with a removable battery that you of course don't get when the battery is not removable. But in general, all the same, I feel like if the battery is really important to you, you are probably going to want a different phone with a much larger battery. But again, in general, if it's not really a priority, the battery we're getting with this phone is at least going to be good enough. Now, when it comes to the software, as you can see, this phone does currently have Android 12, and seeing that it is a pretty low-end device, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be getting any major updates. But that being said, it's definitely not impossible. But either way, for what it is, having Android 12 is at least decent, so I don't really have any complaints there. Another thing I do want to point out here is that unfortunately, this phone doesn't have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using Tap and Pay, keep in mind, you won't be able to do that with this phone. Taking a look at the actual design, it's really not bad. Pretty much a generic low-end phone kind of look. One thing I don't really care for here though, is that unlike pretty much every phone in the US, this phone has micro USB instead of USB-C. So if you have a bunch of USB-C cables and you're considering getting this phone, then keep in mind, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to use those. But other than that, I do think the design is decent. I mean, the materials are pretty cheap, but again, this is a phone that's under $100, so it's not too surprising. In general though, aside from feeling a little light and cheap, the build quality is at least decent, and it doesn't feel like it's about to fall apart. But in conclusion, is the TCL 30Z still worth buying in 2023? In general, for most people, I feel like this phone is probably not going to be the best choice. It's missing features like NFC and a decent camera setup, and again, the storage really isn't good. So if you're going to be using your phone a decent amount, you're probably going to be disappointed here, especially when you consider the performance. This phone is probably going to leave a bit to be desired. But that being said, not everyone is really a heavy user, and there are plenty of people out there who don't really want to spend a ton on a phone and really just need something basic to get the job done for daily activities. And if that's you, if you're really looking for a super affordable phone that may not have great performance, a ton of storage, or any fancy features, but is at least a solid, reliable device that will get the job done for basic activities, in that kind of situation, I do think the TCL 30Z is a pretty decent option. Now once again, in case you want to learn more about this phone, I will be linking to several other videos about it in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram, and as always, I will see you in the next video.